boys and girls. We're going to continue with Poppy by Avi. Chapter 6, Standing Before Mr. Oakax. The leaves on the oak trees around Mr. Oakax's oak shielded him from the rain, but Poppy and her father were being drenched. The owl's head, moreover, was pulled down between his wings, while his eyes, enormously wide and unblinking, gave Poppy the sensation that there was nothing she might do or even think of doing which he could not, would not see. To Poppy, he seemed to be pure power and fury. Wanting to look away, she glanced at the base of Mr. Oakax's tree. There lay what appeared to be a mound of pebbles. Gradually, a ghastly realization came over her. What she was seeing was a mound of Mr. Oakax's upchucked pellets, the closely packed and undigested bits of fur and bone from his dinners. The vision made her blood turn cold. Only the sound of Mr. Oakax's sneering voice jolted her back to alertness. "What do you want, Lungwort?" the owl demanded, his claws continually flexing on his perch. Lungwort, holding his cap in hand like an empty bucket, said, "May I wish you a very pleasant evening, Mr. Oakax?" "It's not very pleasant," Mr. Oakax returned with a snarl. "No? Well, you're absolutely right there, Mr. Oakax," Lungwort replied, straining to sound jaunty. "But April showers, as the song goes, bring May flowers, and Mr. Oakax clacked his beak. "Lungwort, it's summer. Did you come here to sing me idiot songs, or do you have something important to say?" "Well, in fact, I did bring—" "Hurry up, I've not eaten my dinner yet, and I'm hungry." "Well, yes, of course," Lungwort said. "I understand perfectly." Lungwort hastily put on his hat, not noticing until too late that it had filled with rain. Water cascaded over his head. With a nervous shake, he fumbled to unroll the speech paper. Before he could get out, Mr. Oakax's eyes grew bigger. "Who's that?" he demanded, as he moved his head about to bring Poppy into better focus. "Forgive me," Lungwort said. "I've been rude. This is one of my dutiful daughters." Poppy stepped forward. "Look up." "There's a good mouse. Mr. Oakax, may I introduce Poppy to you?" Prodded by her father, she stepped forward gingerly. All she could see was Mr. Oakax's eyes. She felt, not just looked, but attacked. "Poppy, he growled. "I think we have already met." "One of my sweetest," Lungwort offered. Mr. Oakax ignored him. Instead, he said, "What happened to your nose, girl?" I scraped it." "A close call, I'd say." "Yes, sir." "Little girl mice should be more careful." "Yes, sir." "Do you understand me?" Poppy longed to run away. Lungwort nudged her. "Poppy, dear, Mr. Oakax asked if you were understanding him." "Yes, sir, I do," Poppy squeaked with a bob of her head. "All right, then," Mr. Oakax said. "Now be a good little girl and come stand under my tree while I talk to your father." Hating herself for acting so fearful, queasy at the thought of going closer to the mound of pellets, Poppy appealed to her father with a look. Lungwort, however, only nodded. "Move it," Mr. Oakax snapped. Averting her eyes from the pellets, Poppy crept toward the tree, the flag dragging behind her. But when she reached the spot, she was unable to resist the fascination of the horrible mound. Once she looked, she caught sight of something that glittered. "All right, Lungwort," Mr. Oakax said. "Let's hear what you have to say." Now let's think for a minute. Why do you suppose Mr. Oakax wants Poppy to stand under the tree? And here's a picture, okay? And you can see Lungwort right there in the rain, and Mr. Oakax, he looks pretty fearful. "Thank you, sir, thank you," Lungwort held out his piece of paper. Now the thimbleful of water, as well as the rain, had drenched it. All the same, he tried to read. "Whereas Mr. Oakax, great horned owl, ruler of Dimwood Forest region, who, out of his kindness and wisdom, protects all the members of the deer mice family, Whereas the said family of the deer mice living in Gray House in return for Mr. Okex's protection have agreed to ask his permission whenever they wish to move about. Whereas the deer mice family, having grown so great in numbers, need a second place of habitation so as to maintain and enhance their lives with sufficient food. And Lungwort paused to shake the paper. And what? Mr. Okex demanded. The paper is somewhat wet, Lungwort apologized. So is the style, Mr. Okex observed. Go on. Lungwort cleared his throat and continued to read. Whereas Mr. Okex, protector of deer mice, is famous for his kindness, generosity, compassion. Stop. Yes. Repeat that. What? That line about me. Now, about kindness and generosity? Right. I like it. It's well written. Yes, thank you. I wrote it. Whereas Mr. Okex, protector of deer mice, is famous for his kindness, generosity, and compassion. Therefore, said deer mice of Gray House humbly petitioned, said Mr. Okex, to... Will you get to the point? Mr. Okex screeched in exasperation. I'm sorry, Lungwort said. The rain has washed away the rest of my writing. Then just dump it and say what you want, the owl boomed. We humbly request your permission, Lungwort finally said, to move. Move? Yes. Why? I said, we are too many. We need more food. Where do you want to go? To New House? First, Mr. Okex blinked. Next, he swiveled his head around, frowning at first Lungwort, then down at Poppy, then again at Lungwort. Finally, he said, You mean that new place up along the tar road beyond New Field? Why do you think Mr. Okex is treating them in such a nasty, horrible way? Poppy thought she heard something new in Mr. Okex's voice. She tried to grasp it. Yes, sir. Mr. Okex hesitated. Well, have you been there? Now Poppy was sure. It was uncertainty that she was hearing. Have you been there before? Mr. Okex demanded shrilly. Well, the truth is, Lungwort said, my friend, Mr. Yes or no, the owl screamed. Well, no, not exactly. But my friend told me it would make an excellent source of food for half of my family. Lungwort, Mr. Okex interrupted, I forbid you to move to New House. What? Lungwort gasped, flapping the rain away from his face with a paw. The word had all but been sucked out of his throat. Permission denied, Lungwort. You cannot move to New House. But, why, sir? Because I said so. But, the Gray House area does not provide enough food. It's urgent that some of us move so we can survive and no new house. Now, I've got a dinner to catch. You better skedaddle, unless, of course, you want to please me by leaving your daughter. Then the owl chuckled. I might reconsider. But, Mr. Okex leaned forward. Whoo, whoo, he wailed in his loudest but lowest voice. The sound exploded over them. Poppy, clasping paws to ears, ran from under the oak tree toward her father, who was still standing there stammering. But, come on, Papa, Poppy urgently urged, trying to turn her father around. We better go. With difficulty, she turned him. Lungwort, Mr. Okex called suddenly. Lungwort whirled so fast that the thimble fell off his head. Bowing, smiling, he began, You were just teasing me. Listen to me, Lungwort, Mr. Okex cried. I have two more things to say to you. First, pass the word among your friends. I've spotted a new porcupine around Dimwood. Porcupine? Lungwort echoed dumbly. A particularly vicious one, but don't worry, I'll protect you. Second, it's about your daughter here. If you want the reason for my refusal, ask her how I met her before. Reason? She didn't ask my permission to go to the hill. That's why. So what choice is Mr. Okex giving Lungwort? He says, you can have your way if you leave Poppy. Or I'm denying what you're asking. It's a terrible thing to put a father in. That's why you can't go to New House. Yes, but beat it, Lungwort, now. Come on, Papa, we better leave. Lungwort glanced about for his thimble hat. It had rolled away. It was Poppy who retrieved it and put it on his head. Resigned, a sagging Lungwort allowed himself to be led away. Poppy glanced at her father. All traces of dignity were gone. The wetness that ran down his face was not rain, but tears. Poppy hardly tried to hold the flag aloft, and as they trudged home, she kept stealing looks into one of her paws. In it was clenched something she had pried from one of Mr. Oakex's pellets. Ragweed's earring. Now, I know he's making a show about being ugly about Poppy, but what do you think Mr. Oakex's real reason is for not allowing them to move? Oh, and here's a picture of the earring. That's what was glittering, and she did get it back. We had thought she might. Thanks for listening, and we'll do another chapter tomorrow.